Can't get it back.
Excavated.
Can't convert it to anything.
Put it on.
So coming in, already here. We're starting the wastewater resources advisory committee meeting, December 2nd, with the Yarmouth DPW. And I'd like to call the roll first. So you know who's here. Mark, not here. Bill is online. He appears to be on Survivor Island.
No, I'm at campfire at camp. Can't you tell? Okay.
So we're going to ask you to speak up next time we chime in so we can hear you. Mary? Can you hear us, Mary? Mary Craig, can you hear us? We'll get to Mary. David? I'm here. Lee? John and myself, Spiro. So Mary, if you can hear us, just sort of. Great, thank you. Because we have an item posted for public comment and we have folks actually here for that item number 5. I thought we'd probably just introduce ourselves so everybody knows who's here. I'm Spiro Richard is the chair of the Wastewater Resources Advisory Committee.
David Bernstein, representing the Conservation Commission member committee.
Lou? Or no?
Bob Rittenauer, Town Administrator.
Lou Ragazzino with Ray Pierce, Honors Project Manager.
Mike Judici with CDM Smith. David Young with CDM Smith.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
with CDM Smith.
Sorry. Water, solid water and wastewater solution.
And Jeff Colby, Public Works Director. Great.
People up there.
Oh, hi.
Sorry,
It's okay. I'm Will Rubenstein. I'm the planning board representative to the
thank you.
URAC.
I noticed George is also present for the meeting. Can we unmute you, George, for a second?
What is this sound?
You got me now?
Thanks, George. Great. We'll just get started. We're keeping it the regular. Mark is here too. Keeping it to our regular portion of our meeting, so we can catch up with the consultant and the department heads. And I'll probably give us a good coordination to go into anything else we're going to be discussing later. So, practice, we're going to turn it over first to Lou for project manager update.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First on the agenda is the water resource recovery facility permitting. So as we're aware that on August 5th, a groundwater discharge permit was issued from Mass DEP. We continue to have working groups with DEP. The last one was held on October the 8th. Another one is scheduled for, the next one is scheduled for next Tuesday, December 10th. And we're working with the town and the consultant CDM Smith on exploring other sites for increasing groundwater discharge and also potential spray irrigation expansion at the Bayberry Hills Golf Course. As far as the water resource recovery facility construction, the notice of intent to award was sent to CH Nickerson. They were the low bidder on October 7th. And the authorization to award was received from the Massachusetts State Revolving Fund on November 22nd. And a pre-construction meeting was held that following Monday on November 25th.
Question for you.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Getting back to Buck Island discharge permit. At one point we talked about asking for more Any movement on that?
That's gonna be the subject of follow-up investigations and also determined by, as we start discharging water on the site, actually observing to see how does the groundwater react to it, so. I guess.
Yeah,
it's
groundwater discharge permits are issued for 5-year durations. So you have to renew 6 months before that expires. That's when we'll have some data to be able to present to them. And at that point is when the town would ask for an increase in capacity at that site. Until we have more on-site data, permit is what it is.
Thank you.
Moving on to the collection system, there are 2 contracts underway. Contract 2, which is being constructed by Robert B. Hour, and contract 3 by Rivoli Construction. Work right now is continuing on Route 28 on contract 2 between Forest Road and just past Wood Road, water main and services. And then on contract 3 on Route 28 and on South Shore Drive. That work is planned to continue through the winter with Mass DOT weather permitting. And contract 4 was also awarded to Robert B. Hour. That work is on the easternmost end of Route 28 on Main Street near the Bass River Bridge. That work is anticipated to start March 25th. In completion before DOT restrictions on Route 28 in May. And then contracts 5 and 6 were also bid and awarded. Bid on September 11th. The bid results came in. Those notices of intent to award were issued to Robert B. Hour for contract 5 and Diggett Construction to contract 6. We are just awaiting authorization to award from Mass SRF on both of those contracts. The notices of intent were issued. So the good news is that the authorization to award for contract 1 was received November 22nd. That guarantees that the town will receive the 0 interest loan on 6.6% loan forgiveness on the water resource recovery facility. They did award an extension to December 13th for the award on contracts 5 and 6. I'll ask Mike to just kind of fill us in on where that stands.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of items to clean up. Just on the water resource recovery facility, as you mentioned, we had the pre-construction meeting back on the 25th. Contractor is planning on mobilizing and starting the prep work at the site in January, just so you're aware of the time frame. So they will be starting work relatively soon, just after the holidays. So contracts 5 and 6, as Lou indicated, where we're just working with SRF the last couple of remaining items into them to receive authorization to award. We expect that to happen in the next week or so. We actually have an extension from them through this Friday, the 6th. They indicated that they would be willing to extend to the 13th. We haven't officially requested that yet, but depending on where we are in the next couple of days, we'll get an extension through the 13th. Unfortunately, that will be the last extension they're willing to issue for the town at this point to stay in this year's SRF cycle. So at this point, we're just continuing to work with them. The good news is a couple of the major hurdles that we had for those 2 contracts came in subsequent to our last meeting in early November. On the 22nd of November, we were issued the MassDOT highway permits for contracts 5 and 6. And the Chapter 91 waterways license was signed by the governor, by the governor herself, on that same day on November 22nd. So those were the 2 big pieces that we're waiting for. Those have come in, and now we're just trying to get the last couple of items in. That's our list.
Any quick questions before he finishes?
No, so as Mike touched on the construction contract schedule, all of the designs are now completed for phase 1 of the collection system, wastewater treatment facility. Contract 1, the contractor indicated to be mobilizing, maybe doing some initial clearing and bringing equipment on site, probably for a start in the late winter, early spring of 2025. And then contracts 5 and 6, pending authorization to award, we're still anticipated to sometime in March or in the beginning of the spring of 2025. We anticipate those construction contracts to begin. And that's everything west of Parker's River towards the Martinsville town line.
Well, we're not on the slides yet, but Will or George, Mary, any questions up to this point reviewing the 5 and contracts up to 5 and 6? Forever on repeat. Like me. I keep remembering that check in with those guys too. It's scheduled on page 3. With the remaining schedule on page 3.
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered everything, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so any questions on the schedule? I guess you did actually referring to it as you're just speaking. I want to remind everyone that 4, 5, and 6 will be underway in the spring of 2025. The schedule. Even as 2 and 3 are working through the winter.
Going to soon plan a pre-construction meeting with the businesses before the 5 and 6 start.
Yes, we'll be looking to do something before 5 and 6 start, probably in the late winter.
So probably March-ish.
It's a good time frame, yeah.
So can you remind us, has everyone in phase 1 gotten their property owners gotten their letters?
No, we haven't sent them to 5 and 6 yet. We're just waiting for the contracts to be officially awarded, and then we'll send them out.
And
I'm ready to send.
just to remind folks what we're talking about, what does the letter say?
The letter just indicates that a function of their stub has been set on the plans, but it may not be where they want it, so they just need to get back to us with the stub, and this time we're including a little bit more information about, how we're putting in water and sewer, and in some cases force main, so we'll be in front of every property multiple times, so just patience. It has a QR code to the website and where they can look up the plans and the schedules.
Since we have experience with 2 and 3, how frequently does that happen or has happened?
To move the stubs,
Well, to get an inquiry.
frequently, most people end up contacting us about.
Really?
It's mostly gone through Jay, Ray Pierce's inspector, but we're gonna also get just today, we have a new assistant wastewater superintendent who's gonna be getting involved and will help keep track of those as well.
Since we're on a roll here, how often does the stub conversation result in modification?
I'm not sure what percentage, but when CDM drew up the plans, they did look at where the septics are, and just sometimes the plans either aren't there or weren't clear, so they want to adjust it, and different people have different plans for their property that might impact where they want their stub, so many have changed, but I don't know how many percentage.
And procedurally, how does that change take effect? You're gonna change the plan first?
No, so the letters go out, as Laurie indicated, prior to, the idea is to keep ahead of contractors where they're working, because it's critical that they know exactly where each stub for each property has to go, because they have to put a fitting on the mainline pipe, a wide connection for the property to connect to, so they stay ahead of them, as Laurie said, Jay or whoever the inspector is, would potentially meet with the homeowner decide where they want the stub, put a stake in the ground, and the contractor gets the stub is supposed to go. So
What's going on? And then it's just updated on the record drawings.
so it's not a redesign necessarily, it's, yeah.
No, I
In
understand.
some cases, they may move 5 feet or 10 feet, so it's not reissuing the
So
design.
what I'm getting at, there's a set of plans that we made publicly available. Those changes wouldn't appear on those plans. They're on the working documents in the field.
Correct, so once the project is done, we'll issue what we call record drawings, which shows the as-built condition, because everything moves around, you know, the manhole locations will move based on where utilities are, the alignment of the sewer might change based on existing utilities, and that sort of thing, so that all gets picked up during construction and is reflected on the record drawings that get issued at the end.
Some of this questioning is not necessarily to go over old business, but to bring other people up to speed. who
Sure.
may not have had
Okay, cool.
So, once that change has been designated, you're dropping in the connection at that point, and from that point on, it's up to the property owner to make the appropriate connection on their side.
Stub gets extended from the town's main to the property line, and that location gets recorded, so when it's time for the property owner to connect, their drain layer will be able to go back and connect to that.
Right, so just suggesting that with this project's, this town's work would be done once the connection is in place. You cannot go back and change it at that point.
It's ideal that best case scenario would be you wouldn't have to change. Could you change it if you absolutely had to? Yes, it's not the best. You'd have to cut into the pipe, which we don't want to do with a brand new pipe, but no, I would say,
Right.
if people want to move the location, they should respond to the letter that gets sent up to the town before the contractor installs the main line on the street.
So I'm gonna reiterate that.
Yes.
As you go down. At some point, it becomes prohibitively expensive or unnecessarily expensive to do that. There's some sort of review process that would decide with the property owner at that point, if you can actually do what they want with that.
Presumably, I don't think we've encountered that at this, up to this
Yeah.
point.
No,
so-
Because if we're going out in January with another set of letters, so we emphasize that this is your one shot that we're at adjustment before it goes into place, because afterwards, it's a whole lot more.
Yes. Yes.
Question, if the stub has already been installed, is it possible to add a second one?
The policy has been one stub per property.
Yeah, there've been a couple of cases where we've done multiple for large parcels or circumstances where there might be multiple buildings or multiple systems at different elevations and parking on different side streets, things like that. So there's an opportunity, if there's any interest in having additional stubs, they should reach out to Lori and myself and we'll work through them on that. There's been a couple of cases, but it's not usually necessary, but
So where the pipe's already gone by a given property, if it became necessary, it's still doable.
the short answer is anything's possible, which is much more difficult after the fact.
More cost.
Question. I'm assuming, I mean, the main thrust of what the contractors are doing right now is putting in the main lines by the properties, and they're gonna come back and do laterals. As, once they complete that operation, which means that we're gonna forestall doing any paving and, final dressing up of pavement until we get all those laterals.
Correct. I would just offer one thing. In some cases, particularly on 28, I know RVR in particular has been getting all the pipe work done in certain areas just so it can be out and not have to impact the businesses. You're right, the typical procedure is for the main line to go in and then for the contractor to come back with a smaller crew at a later time. that later time could be within a couple of weeks or could be several months, depending on how their schedule rolls out. With the smaller crew to put the laterals in for the services, but in some cases, they've been doing it all at the same time, just to disrupt a certain area more than once.
So with regard to contracts 2 and 3, are we anticipating a time frame for when we're gonna be completed with 28? Yeah, the main feeder lines, mainly I'm concerned about 28. Do you think it's gonna happen this year, or we're gonna go into next year?
The main lines are mostly all in already on Route 28.
Right.
The Rivoli section still needs to do their services, which a lot of them need to cross the road, which will be a challenge, and then they need to come back and do water. The Robert Hour crew is almost, they have to do that section by Seafood Sam's. And then from like Wood Road to Hearth and Kettle, which is a really short section, and then all the sewer for contract 2 on Route 28 will be done besides some stubs. They still need to do the water. The water's a lot faster. So they both anticipate being done with sewer before this summer.
In the spring.
Yeah.
So you're gonna do the water next year? Next.
Well,
next fall?
Robert Hour wants to have it all done, everything on Route 28 by the spring, but Rivoli's your guess is as good as mine.
So Mike, move on to your slides. We need to do that.
Mr. Chair, I think we covered everything that's shown on the slides as usual. There's a lot of overlap, obviously, between the news report and ours, and I followed up with anything that was.
Since you sent them along, does anyone have any questions? At this point? Or the progress report and the slides? Who's up?
Mary?
Marie? Go ahead.
Yep.
I think she said. Oh, thank you. How, did we make this emergency order permanent now, Bob? That we can always be on Zoom, we're never gonna go back?
No, we're gonna stay on Zoom. Hybrid.
Great, that gets us through discussion with our consultants. I think we discussed the permitting status of our permitting. Thank you for the explanation, Dave, on how we're going to be monitoring our discharge permits for future renewal. One of the things we bring back to the table is any concerns we have with public safety and our communication with the public, technically with the community that these guys are serving. Traffic is slowed, construction has somewhat slowed, so there should be points of conflict right about now. Anybody heard anything we need to address out there?
No, but I think the signage is great. It really has. Got the experience in South London. I went through there today. I think it's greatly improved. So this side, we get all that knowledge going into 5 and 6.
Sure, and practice doing detouring. So once you start detouring on this side of Parker's River, we have a facility that most of us use in summer called Buck Island Road. It's gonna get us around a lot of stuff fairly easy. And given that we've awarded all the contracts in phase 1 at this point, no?
5 and 6, not yet.
Well, designated, budgeted. I'm just getting to the finance question, which is, we're not $20 million over like other people. Just kidding. We are within budget, what was appropriated at town meeting, so that we're not planning to go back to the town to ask them for any additional funding for phase 1.
On that note, how are we doing with the contingency funds? Change orders and that kind of thing. We're on budget, but the question is, are we eating into that significantly? The two contracts we got going now?
I think on Contract two, we're probably about 5%. And slightly less for Rivoli's contract. There's still some outstanding change orders we need to work through with them. That could change that dynamic pretty significantly, but both the bulk of both of those contracts, change orders were signed early on with the delay that added up in both cases to the late start for those construction contracts.
So that, in that regard, as far as change orders are concerned, they're mainly due to delays in start? Or
Both of the agreed upon change orders with you, the delay and start of those two contracts.
but there aren't any change orders due to problems with the design or issues we discovered in the field that
No, there are some of the ones that have been agreed upon for a contract two related to unidentified water stubs or other utility conflicts. Some of the other change orders.
Delivery back in.
Directional drilling.
Yeah, directional drilling was another big one for contract two. Those would have conflict with the gas. So it was more utility conflicts for change orders we had with one. So we had a budget of 5% change orders for all the contracts. So we're within that, and to the point that was raised earlier, below the overall budget. So for the purposes of reporting to SRF, we've added to the percentage of change order or contingency, if you will, in all the contracts across the board in order to kind of balance out those numbers. Give us a little more breathing.
That's okay?
Jeff, just a quick question, operationally. That temp water line they're running on South Street, that's gonna run through the winter.
That's for dewatering, and they'll need to run that as long as they're dewatering in those locations. So right now they're working on South Shore heading towards the Red Jacket.
Yeah.
And so that's an active dewatering effort. When they switch and head in another direction, they'll be able to, stop dewatering, potentially abandon certain sections of that. But yes, dewatering will be necessary for the remainder of the work on South Shore.
Gotcha.
Great, gentlemen, thank you. We're making ourselves available more clearly to the public. They would like to engage us about the project at this meeting. If anybody remembers our charge, it's on the website, by the way. The selectmen created this committee to both serve them and the community, to exchange information about the project as we go forward, and bring in concerns and vice versa. Conversely, take in those concerns. Is the department or committee requested anytime between now and the end of the year from the selectmen? Are we at some juncture where we need to meet with the selectmen just for scheduling purposes? It's December and we're not meeting again. Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, we have regular wastewater updates, and usually there's one or two members there, but we haven't had a presentation between the RAC and the.
So for planning purposes, we probably don't need to have another wastewater update for the end of the year at the selectmen's meeting. But probably as the newer contracts start to come online, it would probably be the time to come back at that point and brief the selectmen. Just checking, make sure we know what we should have on our calendar, or we should be planning to attend if need be. With that, we're in the sort of public comments phase. Today, we knew, or we know, that there are folks here who want to discuss a particular aspect of the project, and we were prepared to do so. We're here to talk about a little bit about pump station number 2, which is part of contract number 6. And I'm going to start off by asking the folks who wanted to be here to introduce themselves so everybody knows who's in the room. So Aside with that, let's start with Mark, just to make sure everybody knows we have selectmen in the room. Mark here.
Yes. Just to make it abundantly clear.
Along with that, we have guests who may be selected soon.
Liz Argo, I'm running for the select.
Sure, Paul.
I'm Paul Chaffee with the Town Communications and Technical Support.
Bill Snowden, advisor to my friend Chris here.
Is he paying you?
No.
You are.
Cranberry.
Chris Wilson.
Sure. So by way of introduction, what is your relationship and understanding with this particular issue? I'm going to give you the floor now.
Awesome. Yeah, so I own the farm stand Freshman Divine and operate the cranberry bogs. I'm head manager of the cranberries, soon to be 50% owner. I have quite large concerns with pump station 2 being so close to the bogs. One of those is the retaining wall that's present there now, and the integrity of it. Yeah. And so just wanted to share.
So what do we have in terms of slides? Can we put anything up there that relates to this?
Oh, that rendering would be awesome. If you could pop that up.
I don't know if we have it on the screen. I have a couple of copies with me, which is.
I don't know if I have.
So when you tell us, everyone who's right here or participating. I have some of these too.
Excuse me.
Where we're at.
These are the retaining wall pictures, and you'll see the cracks, and if you ever come over and look, you'll see how it bows out at least almost 10–15% in many of the areas. But this is only a 5.5-inch retaining wall, about 4 feet high, and it's 150 feet long, and it's got cracks all the way.
So although the committee may know where pump station 2 is, just want to make sure everybody else either listening or isn't familiar with it. We're talking about a station that is in front of the cranberry bog at the, tell me if there's a better description, capability building. Right.
And if I could just add that pump station 2, the 80,000 gallon deep well, is 10 feet from the edge of that retaining wall, and that's 331 tons of of pressure on 10 feet away at a 3-foot slope grade. And that's going to be way too much. That retaining wall's over 40 years.
So
Has DEP looked at that?
So before we jump way ahead, we have engineering plans for that area, or just site plan for that area?
We have site plan. I unfortunately don't have them here, Mr. Chair, but yes, we have site plans and layout for location, configuration of the pump station.
A lot of us are familiar with it.
Yep.
The site plan is available online. And I think Mr. Wilkins seen those.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's
And they
based
do-
off of even my concerns is based off of that. Right?
And they do make some detail clear on what Bill is referring to in terms of the infrastructure out there. I'm correct in that. I'll keep going. We can sit there and be otherwise. In other words, when we start talking about wells and retaining walls, and if this is all something that would be on the site plan.
The retaining wall is shown on the site plan.
But this is not information that's new to the project.
No.
So we're just,
Yep.
just
So,
identifying.
So it's a good question to ask. I assume that our technical engineering experts have taken that into consideration in protecting that wall. And the cranberry bog, maybe you've been putting some sheeting and
So there's temporary supports during construction, whether it's sheeting or solid tiles and lagging installed. So there's a couple of components just for everyone's information. three main components of pumping station. That's what we call a wet well, which is where the wastewater gets collected. Submersible pumps sit inside the wet well and then they pump out through a concrete structure that's much shallower, so valve vault that contains valving, as the name implies, and piping with access to manipulate something to turn off the force main if need be. The third main component is the pumping station control building itself, which for anyone who's seen the rendering, so that's essentially, it's a 11.5 by 17-foot precast concrete structure, made to look like a small shed, and that contains all the electrical equipment inside. Behind the control building is a fenced-in area that will have an emergency on-site generator that sits behind the control building. So in terms of the construction for the wet well, which is a deep structure, again, precast concrete structure, we're calling for temporary shoring to be installed so that there's no impact to the surrounding area while that excavation is
How deep is it? Like,
about 25 feet from ground surface everywhere along the structure. So that shoring, the contractor will be required to hire a geotechnical engineer to design that shoring, as well as a dewatering system that works in concert with the shoring, so that will get submitted during the shop drawing process of construction for us to review, and then the contractor will use those plans to excavate that hole to install the.
so it's really digging a hole, shoring a hole, putting in precast system and then backfill.
Before we get to the nitty gritty, can you just remind everyone how we get to this location for PS2?
Sure, so it goes back, a dozen years or so or more, actually, so.
2010.
Yeah, 2009, 2010, when this original phase one was conceived and designed the first time. We did an evaluation of, 3 or 4 different parcels in the area. Again, obviously, this is familiar with the area. This is the low point, topographical low point of the area where all the gravity supports would feed to. So somewhere in this vicinity, pumping station is needed in order to convey the wastewater so that it can continue on its way and eventually up to the water resource recovery facility. So we looked at several parcels in the area at that time. This site was deemed to be, it has a lot of benefits in that it's already a cleared site. And there was a willing property owner to agree to an easement to host the pumping station. Property has changed ownership since that time. But that was designed originally back in 2009, 2010.
Okay, but reaffirmed
At
recently
that location.
with this project. Is that the locus we're looking at?
Yes.
So that's the site plan.
So
yes.
somewhere in the site plan, we need a pump the effluent along its way up.
That's
towards,
correct.
The junction on the West Yarmouth Road. Okay. What are we looking at here? The darkest area must be the parking lot.
Yeah, I can point a few things out, Chair. So this is the existing curb cut and the entranceway into capabilities, which is off to the right outside, outside the limits of the site plan. So this is Route 28 here, Standish Ave across the street. The retaining wall starts right around here and is shown in this, along this dark line. It extends to right about here. This is showing, the lines are showing here are showing some of the easements that we're taking for the parcel. So the wet well that I described is this structure here. There's a valve vault here, the meter vault here, and then this is the control building with the generator behind and inside a fenced area. So the idea would be a access driveway to allow operations and maintenance staff on the town side to visit the pumping station on a daily basis. I will back up. Originally, the site, if you look back on the 2010 plans, The control building, first of all, was a little bit bigger than it is now because of a change in the plumbing code. We've had to make it smaller, otherwise we would have, and we've talked about that in this meeting, we would have had to put in a bathroom in the facility. But that control building was originally located in this area, backing up against where Mr. Wilson currently has his operation. At the time, that didn't exist. It wasn't operating in the 2009, 2010 timeframe. So that building was located there, and the other structures were sort of in this area. Once we took the design up again in the last couple of years, working with town staff, it was, you know, we certainly took into account the operation of the farm stand, and that's one of the reasons why, the main reason why the site is, you know, located, laid out as it is now, so that we could maintain some sort of access to the farm stand, which sits right off of this end of the behind the retaining wall, off of that side of the property. So the idea would be people could still come in and use that access driveway in order to access the farm stand.
Everything that's shaded is part of this pump station.
Correct. Yeah, and it's showing different types of
The
materials.
only above grade structure is that
Okay,
white area.
So what I'm getting at, what is visible and above ground obstructive, for lack of a better word, is just that white box. Okay, so if somebody were to look at these before and after pictures, it would be the shed, that white box.
Yes. Correct.
Okay. But the area you're talking about includes this part of the parking area in front for access, and then there are underground, below ground facilities around
Just
it.
for clarification, the wet well, which is that structure toward the left, does have a reveal of about 6 to 8 inches, I believe. So that will stick up above grade, but it's not
So knowing that,
anything that's gonna.
oh, perfect, thank you. So now that you see what it would look like, you guys okay with this rendering?
Well, no, that's there's one major thing that's missing out of this rendering, and that is the grade elevation changes. This does not show the 2 to 3 feet elevation change in order to get to the 14-foot elevation.
So the area that includes the shed would be higher, as you're saying?
Much, yes. About 2 to 3 feet higher.
Yeah, it's just a function of the, there's only so much you can do with a, this is a Photoshop rendering. To show what the site would look like. But you're right, there is a grade change. Because we're in the floodplain here, the first floor of the control building has to be up at elevation 14, which is 3 feet above the 100-year floodplain, elevation 11, just to protect the electrical equipment.
You know, looking at this, it would look as if you can access the farm stand. How much of what is there now are you losing if this were to go through?
Flat plane, almost nothing, but with the elevation change, it makes it quite dangerous for people to access the farm stand. We're talking at the end of that 12-foot, if we could go back to the plan.
Line up there.
So you're saying the elevation goes downward towards the farm stand?
It will, yeah.
Yeah,
At quite a degree.
and it is graded, it's not
Right.
stepped.
If we actually could find this plan that shows grade heights as well as the stormwater catch basin that was missing from this plan. See, this doesn't show grade height changes and it doesn't show the stormwater catch basin.
Okay, thank you for that detail. My explanation, my question was really, you lost some parking, how much parking did you lose?
Oh, quite a bit.
Let's get to the,
Yeah, we would have lost
economic
about 7
impact
spaces.
first. So,
And easy
Sorry, how many?
access, about 7 spaces we lose, and easy access for handicap, which
So-
is the majority of the clients that come to.
there's no parking on any of that shaded area?
You could, but I mean, how dangerous is it for one car to
I'm
pass?
asking what they're planning for, if they think that, I mean, you get the shed, you can't park on the shed, but you park next to it around it, I mean.
Yeah, well, the
Losing
sewer
some
department will
space.
only need access like once a day to go there, so it's that
And it won't be for
driveway
very long.
that driveway is available.
It's every real estate agent sort of question. How many parking spaces did we lose that are there now? And that's 2, 3? You're saying it's 7, 6, 7?
I could show you
I
a,
think based on
a
the plan, I
picture.
can see how you get a 7, but most of that stuff's underground, so wouldn't you get to keep the parking spaces in this case?
Well, as
I'm sorry, I was just to say, this area here, you can see the dark shading is paving, so this is asphalt, and yes, it does slope down back toward the farm stand.
Quite a bit.
This area here, it's, yeah, 3 feet or so. This area here is, that's all below grade, so that's intended to be, to allow vehicles to turn around, so you can pull in and back out, you get out of the site, so you could park there. As I said, this wet well will have some reveal, so it will be sticking up, so you can't park there, but you could certainly park on this side of the building, between the building and the wet well, and out here. And then this is actually gonna change at some point.
Mike, can you,
I know you guys are
could you
dying.
point out where the property line is? I mean, I'm assuming
Yeah.
you're on somebody else's property.
This is the property line for capabilities, and it follows back along here. It's, I don't know, 10 or 15 feet off the retaining wall, maybe.
My line,
About like
quite a lot
four,
more. I mean,
Yeah.
we are on
So that-
property that is
that's-
identified as capabilities land.
It's part of this
So all this is happening
316.
on capabilities land.
Correct.
Absolutely. You are interested in butter.
Yes.
Do you have easements with these guys to access your farmstead? Yes. Okay, so slightly more than an interesting party.
Yes.
They've granted you some rights
Absolutely.
there as well. And whatever happens there ultimately is an agreement with capabilities. But we're here to sort of look at what the impacts are going to be. if that happens.
Exactly right.
Bill.
Spiro, thank you. It's Bob, right?
Like,
76. What can I tell you? Mike, the wet well,
Well,
you call it?
yes.
That says in the answers here that it's gonna hold 80,000 gallons.
So
Hold on.
it's not all contained in the wet well.
I
So
know.
what I was trying to do is to give you a general sense and answer the question. It's a combination of the volume available in the wet well and in the upstream sewers and manholes that feed into it. So it's not 80,000 in the wet well itself.
Has a engineered study been done on the total weight of that facility and the additional soil to bring it up to grade? Has anything been done to calculate the total weight of all of that? And parts of that are less than 10 feet from the, especially the grade, from the edge of that retaining wall. I've built retaining walls, but I'm not a professional, but I've built them. And I know the regulations, I know what the engineers tell me. He had an engineer look at it. And that retaining wall, by any calculation, is incapable of taking the weight of all of that on that. How many gallons are gonna be in that wet?
The pressure of
Well-
that shouldn't matter. It's actually the stormwater that would.
No, it's not. Trust me, that just the weight of it compacting down is gonna push out. There's engineers there, they'll tell you that.
Is the retaining wall
Capabilities.
But,
capabilities?
but. Well, I don't think that's an issue because if that wall comes down and anything heads to that bog, capabilities is liable and so isn't the town. This is a simple thing to solve.
Just to clarify, the weight of the wastewater in the well is going to be well below the bottom of the retaining wall. So that wouldn't have any impact. I can see if you want to discuss or bring up putting additional fill that would add weight to the site, but the weight of the wastewater in the structure itself is going to be significantly below the bottom of the retaining wall. So that's not going to have an impact. It's not going to create any outward pressure or cause any issues.
And a geotechnical analysis was done on that.
It was, can we see it?
Well, the boring's done and our designers took care of that.
Yes.
But he's interested in knowing that information so it can be reviewed by an independent engineer. Because I spent 50,000 40 years ago to learn this lesson, that even though the base of that wet basin of the wet, yeah, that is going to put pressure going towards that wall that wasn't there before. It wasn't there before.
If I could just explain to you, it's like a container that's got probably 8 inches or 10 inches of concrete wall that contain the fluid that's inside.
I'm well aware of what it is.
Yeah.
Respectfully, I understand what you're saying, but the total weight of it on that sand is going to push that way. It can't say physics, but it's just structural engineering. I've had a structural engineer show me how that happens.
Can I ask you a question another way?
Yeah.
Is there a retaining wall? Is it possible to build a retaining wall to address the pressure concerns you're raising?
Absolutely you could, and that's what we were hoping that we would hear that, because if it breaks, it's not gonna be a good day for us.
Obviously,
Cranberry.
at some point, the question, not the problem, is solved.
Yeah, I agree,
That's just one point that we can agree on at the moment.
but it's solvable.
Whether it impacts this retaining wall or not is still subject for
The
discussion.
question is, Spiro, why wasn't the impact without that retaining wall? His bog is inundated with wastewater, I mean with runoff.
Today. Currently.
Yeah, and right now, you're increasing the slope and back of it, so the runoff's gonna be even stronger coming off of it. So I think what he's asking is that that retaining wall needs to be taken down and a real retaining wall built. And that's not the issue for, capabilities to do. That's for the town to remediate. And we haven't seen anything like that. And I think if there were solutions that were on the table, there wouldn't be a next Monday night. It's very simple.
Well, let's get through the two impact questions we're
Yeah.
here to discuss. One is the potential environmental impact of this particular facility on the abutting properties. And the second would be the economic impact.
Right.
If we can identify what that is. What happens after we talk about those two issues? It's not the purview of this committee. So just so we can accommodate you as much as we can.
I appreciate it.
John, can we go back to 2010? You're talking about these trees. I just want to understand who defined an interest on the table here. In 2010, the town of Yarmouth got an easement.
Talk to the property owner about moving forward with an easement and they were agreeable. But at that point, the project stopped because the funding didn't.
When did the town of Yarmouth get an easement?
Because we don't currently have an easement for
We don't currently have an easement.
Correct.
So we're talking about something that will require at some point the cooperation of the current landlord. We don't have an easement.
We're in negotiations with the current landlord.
Okay.
To
Determined.
answer that question too, it originally started off with the easement of just the price of the hookup for the sewer line to the existing building for the owner. That has since increased to over $100,000 for the easement.
Well, that's,
Okay, I'm not talking money right now, I'm just trying to understand.
yeah, whatever the price of the easement is, it's still going to be the landowner's decision to grant it or not grant it.
Yeah, that's not quite the case. I was involved with that discussions back then. George O'Leary, DPW director at the time, was the one that had all the discussions with the property owner. And the area that we're showing is the proposed easement now was exactly the easement area discussed with the property owner at the time.
What's your point though?
Yeah, I was just trying to.
He said the only easement was for the sewer hookup.
The price is going up, it's really the.
All real estate's gone up.
Yes, there is no reason.
Now, but if it's not technically and or environmentally advisable, I'm not sure we're talking about a price either way. Let's just decide, well, this is all doable first.
We may have the cart ahead of the horse here. I'm a retired lawyer, so I'm not gonna hold line on anything in terms of
different charges.
But I am going to suggest that there is an order to which problems are solved. And the necessary first step here is for the town, in my opinion, ex officio, that the town needs to establish what its rights are with regard to the easement. And that negotiation is underway, that probably ought to be finished out so that all the parties concerned know what's involved. The easement could be hypothetically to walk over the land, nothing more, nothing less. The easement could be to pave the land. The easement could be to build a building on the land. It could be to build a pumping station on the land. So I think, we may be having a relevant conversation here, but it might be the conversation that needs to happen after the easement is resolved. Just put that on the table for thought. And it's not a big deal. Easements are very routinely all day, but just get the parties involved, agree on the terms, record the easement, and now you can go to the next step.
So let's make sure, thank you, John. I'm not sure that can accommodate that this evening, but we need to give everybody a chance to put in front of us what they wanted to.
Oh, I don't,
This
that's
right.
I'm not
So
saying it's wrong, I'm just
sort
saying,
of identifying their concerns, which may or may not be coincident with the landowner's concerns. But I want to make sure they had enough opportunity to give us whatever we have this evening, and then I suspect this conversation will continue.
Can I ask Mike a question there, or either one of them? This is a statement that the town of Yarmouth posted on its website regarding Chris's cranberry bog and the station 2. It says, "We want to reiterate that the proposed pumping station poses no environmental threat to the cranberry bog or its operations." I'll stop there. Can you say that you agree 100% with the town's position it took right there, that there is no environmental threat? Because there's no evaluation of what happens if the retaining wall goes down. So my question to you guys, and you've been great in your delivery, thank you. Is that true that the proposed pumping station poses no environmental threat to the cranberry bog or its operation? You say that unequivocally.
Well, I think the answer is that there are no guarantees in life, but the town has taken as many precautions as and over and above industry standard today for that pumping station.
Can you print out or leave or send Chris what you consider those standards?
We did it, I assume you've seen the response to 20-something questions.
Well, I guess
I still have some more
Yeah,
questions
so
on
we
the.
laid out all the redundancy built in there, the backup generators.
But that has nothing to do with the retaining wall, does it?
This is the first I'm hearing the retaining wall's the number one issue.
If you're
The number
him,
one issue in the 20 questions was why this site?
Right.
Which has been picked since
because
2000.
why the site when there's a retaining wall protecting the bog 20 feet away?
Yeah, if I could, so. If we were to go back, why this site, why not Chasebrook Park? The other 2 pumping stations are in town-owned parks, correct?
But that parcel, go ahead.
I was gonna say not in parks, so the town owned parcels, so. that's
But they're both parks, the other 2 pumping stations.
not with the restrictions.
There you
As
go.
far as I know, that are on the Chasebrook and.
How were you made aware of those and what were they, the restrictions? Because we looked in the registry of deeds.
Yeah, I didn't see a difference between Riverwalk Park, Chasebrook Park, Mill Pond. I didn't see a difference.
I have copies of all the conservation restrictions. I can share those with you.
That are posted and recorded at the registry,
Currently active on those 3 parcels.
and they prevent any building
I do.
Love to see them.
Okay.
But how about but the bridge at Chaseburn Park?
It's a structure with a foundation is the restriction.
The bridge won't have a foundation.
The bridge will not meet that definition
Whose definition?
of a structure with a foundation.
Okay, can we get a copy of those tomorrow?
You can get a copy of those
I
absolutely.
really appreciate that, thanks.
Because in order to put this pumping station here, it did have to go through conservation for variance because of its setbacks, the wetland, the bulk.
So you're bringing up the process.
Right.
By saying that, and at a certain point, we all have to default to what we all believe to be true, otherwise we can't function at all. That these are professionals in their fields with experience and licenses, by the way, and contractual obligations to their clients to recommend and do the right things. So we're relying on them to tell us what we can and can't do. And you have every right to ask for that assurance and information that backs it up. But we couldn't get through a project like this if we stopped at every juncture and asked every detail of that. So to some degree, we have to go with their general interpretation that they have taken as much precaution and incorporate as much safeguard in the system to make sure that we're not looking at any significant deleterious impacts.
But Spiro, they don't mention the retaining wall at all.
We are now catching up to the information you're requesting, so we can go back and exercise that as well.
Okay.
And we have to take them at their word that this has not been a concern to this point. So
We don't know.
Let's take a look at it, right? Hence my question to you, which is, it's not necessarily impossible to address this question. It is possible to address this question. And it may require additional facility, additional infrastructure out there to do this. So we need to discuss with them what that would mean if we were to try to incorporate that additional safeguard. Number one, is it necessary? Number two, is it feasible? And number three, is it financially available to us, right? So that's sort of the next step, if you will. So aside from the retaining wall feature of this, the grading issue that you brought up, any other issues? You're looking at vegetation, contamination, what else should we be looking at?
Well, of course, contamination, but I do feel that you guys have done an awesome job at designing the system to make sure that it doesn't contaminate. And every safeguard is in place. That is true. Through other engineering firms, they agree that absolutely the system itself is as perfect as it can be, but the area is not.
But if we were
There was one thing on the system, if I can have an engineer looked at this and is familiar with your company, you guys are great. You're very well known, very competent. However, are you aware that in 1932 in the hurricane, that bog was under, and 38 was under 8 feet of water, salt water? And are you aware that a 100-foot event is inadequate to judge that area by? Hell, Hurricane Bob, the water was over the road and over the park, okay, and down into that parking lot. And Hurricane Bob, and that was a 7 to 9 foot elevation event. You get another 38 hurricane, which there's been 2 in the past century. This time, that station's sitting in 8, 9 feet of water. Question. And you ain't said that there'd be no way anything gets out. Is there any way in that kind of event where the station, no generators, no anything, there's nothing, you're just underwater? What happens to the sewerage you got that you're containing? Can you tell
every
us?
year storm, all of Route 28 is underwater.
Yeah, it's already happened.
There'll be a lot bigger issues.
No, there won't be any bigger issue for him.
Just clarify, so
He survived, that bog survived one over almost 100 years ago. So no,
I'm
it
sure the
won't.
8 to 9 foot was down at the bog elevation, which is 5 or 6 feet below this, and that's why we're raising the elevation of the electrical components and access to 2 feet above what's recommended by design standard, 3 feet above the 100-year flood elevation.
And that elevation.
That
elevation
hurricane was-
14, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that hurricane 1930, I apologize, but that elevation 14, where the first floor of the control building is and the top of the wet well, that's actually equivalent to greater than a 500-year storm. So
Well, here's the
we
thing.
designed to,
You can look and see, they still have the marks where the 38 hurricane went to. It was a 20-foot elevation event
So
from the
and
canal
the towns
to
that
here.
have water,
rhetorically, is there any other location for this pump station where it would not have a significant environmental impact? So you're screwed here and you're screwed there. You just have to decide that we're gonna get screwed somewhere, so we can move forward.
If we're gonna, if there is that chance of something like that happening, why take, I'd say the more of two evils, where you can contaminate both agricultural wetland and conservation land, when you could put it into the park where it'll only contaminate conservation land.
I'm not, I don't particularly would like, I don't really want to make this case, but I suspect that at some point, the state of Massachusetts codes kick in and say, you have to accommodate for this, because if we try to accommodate for this, no one will ever do it. So we're at that level, accommodating what the states are requiring us to accommodate.
What can be done to accommodate him?
So this is what we're here to figure out. Before we run out of time, given what we believe to be the adequate representation of what this thing might look like if it goes through, what are the economic impacts? So we get clear on what happens to your business if this happens.
Well, it's definitely the grade change is a huge one to that. Without doubt, I mean, because at the end of that 12-foot path, 12-foot wide, I think it's like 50 or 60 feet long. At the end of that path, it drops down significantly to the farm stand. So without actually raising the farm stand as well, about 3 feet, 2 to 3 feet. Yeah, anywhere in between, which that grade is completely inadequate for handicap. We need what, 4.8%? Grade change. So for handicap, is it 12%? We're looking at.
We talked about farm stand that currently we're at least attempting to conform to all the physical requirements of public amenity.
Of course, yeah. Why wouldn't it?
I'm just asking because most of us who've been driving by the farm stand all these years wondering, what is it exactly? It's just on the edge of your property, but it is being accessed through the neighboring property.
Right.
And this is something that gets inspected, approved, licensed, permitted. I'm not familiar.
But wouldn't need to, no, not for being farm stand.
No, so that's the question. Is that
Right.
something that you go through a bunch of regulatory hoops to establish? So somebody's gonna come in there and say, you can't operate the city because you can't get to it.
I would think safety for especially elder and handicap would be quite a concern for the town.
So you're trying to avoid being put in the catch-22 where we're constructing something that may not only affect your business, but may affect your permit.
But Spiro, there was one thing, and Chris talked about this, and I know you've had time here to watch. He's open to the solution, trying to find a solution if the town is willing to, because he owns to the left of that property. When you look there all the way over to the edge of the property, there's got to be almost 100 feet, Chris, maybe?
It's 178.
178. 178 feet. If the town is willing to help him with the curb cuts to get in on the left there, where there's already a little road where you go into the 30-acre bog, if the town is willing to help with that, at least part of that retaining wall there, and then to help him either financially or helping him put in a graded, a rock parking lot or something, if you're willing to help him, I know he said, and I told him, look for the solution, not the problem. And the problem, those stuff can be addressed, but what he's stuck is that he would like to at least, okay, if you're gonna, because it's not, he's never gonna get to that farm stand Sparrow. I mean, you're just not, it won't be the same. And that, okay, that can be okay if you help him so that he can just move down and move over in that 178 feet.
Do you continue to access for capabilities?
There would be maybe a walking path just for extra parking, but I would be able to fit maybe a 14-car parking lot on the farm's property.
So is that farm property on wetland or?
That, yes,
Bordering
that's,
wetland?
that would be the problem. Yeah.
It's not on wetland, it's just in
Well,
adjacent.
technically it is.
Within 100 feet of the wetland?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're gonna have to come to conservation too.
Exactly. Just
Wow.
as this pumping station. did.
If the Conservation Commission in town can approve that within that, then you've got, they approve that,
Yeah, exactly right.
It's
Without
in a
paying
parking
it.
lot.
Hmm?
It's in a parking lot.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah. No, no,
but they
no.
approved it within 100 feet.
It-
It's not in wetland.
the bog is.
His isn't,
either
it's
way.
not wetlands, it's not a wetland.
By the way, I want to correct, handicap is 1 foot and 12 feet.
Yes, okay, so that would be a 4.8%.
Yeah, we're putting all the argument on the table.
Yeah.
So we can understand it.
Right.
And the ramifications.
And I think that's a positive one that deserves to be considered here.
Again, advisory board.
Yeah.
We're not regulatory and we're trying to make sure that folks such as yourself have an opportunity to present to the folks who are making decisions. I think we've done that. Hopefully your satisfaction this evening. So far, we're not in a position to say yes, no, and maybe. It's
Right.
just,
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that in. I'm gonna make sure that everybody else has a chance to talk. Let's start with the folks online. Will and George, if you guys have any questions you want to raise at this point, it's gonna run over if we don't.
Nope, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mary is still with us.
She probably had to go, yeah, good Board of Health.
I'm sorry, she's the board of health rep. Let's be here shortly. Anyone of us wants to?
Well, I
Go ahead.
just,
Go
it
ahead.
seems to me that I don't think the town of Yarmouth is interested in having any impact on their business at hand here. And I'm sure that the board of selectmen could find a way to ensure that the business is not impacted. So it's an ongoing discussion that needs to take place here. And I think this whole thing does rest with the board of selectmen. So that's your next move.
Go ahead.
So, question, just looking at that site plan, is there any way to slide that to the right? So you can, it's on the left side of the entranceway now. Is there any way to slide it to the right past the entrance? There's a lot widens in that area. Would leave that, whatever existing parking where that's proposed, just slide it on up.
From an engineering standpoint, yes, but obviously there's,
But I mean-
it's private property and those discussions.
Right,
to
but
my knowledge, haven't.
if you don't have the easement currently. And yes, the negotiations going on, which from what there are, but it's a change of,
It's gonna have an
Locus.
impact on the access driveway that gets into that site. Doesn't look.
I agree, but that lot widens out. So if you keep sliding in that back lot line. I mean, there's a limit because the building access is there, but I'm just throwing that out, so potential.
So that, yeah, that's what happens now that we have this information to digest.
Yep.
Part of the ongoing process. But yeah, that would be a conversation to have with property owners as well. And then you'd still come back and look at what the impacts would be on two issues, environmental and economic. And I suspect the design of the change as well, instead of L shape, just a straight. Linear, so you're not killing parking.
Well, we already have bids.
Oh, I mean.
Oh, no, we're way down the road on this. Yes,
We're
we
down
get
the
it.
road. And the time, the loss of time and the cost for re-engineering and so forth.
We get that is the
May not-
legal ramifications of what we're doing beyond the scope of this group as well. So,
I have a question, maybe to take advantage of all of the education that we have in the room. Just like it's a question, what technical issues will be involved with moving the pump station closer to the capabilities? Do you see any technical feasibility issues associated with the gentleman's request of potentially moving the farm stand to the left and making sure that the grade was adequate such that it was handicap accessible? Would that be a technical element in your view that would be problematic?
In terms of moving the farm stand itself or this?
Yeah, just that if he wants a little more space between the for grade, if nothing else, is that something that is not possible or?
So you move the pumping station more to the right to get.
No, leave the pumping station where it is. I think he suggests moving the
farm stand was.
moving the farm stand a little, taking advantage of that larger area.
Yeah.
if I ask you the question, the answer is you can move the farms.
It could be,
Okay.
yes, at quite an expense though.
Well,
That's it.
He needs some help.
That would be the
I
problem.
don't know, again, first is it feasible and then.
Well, it'd actually fall on conservation to know if it was feasible.
That too, regulatory issues. I'm just saying, if you pick the thing up, is it gonna break in half or?
Oh my, yeah, I don't know, but I am in the process of building a new one.
Okay, so there's that. So what we may end up here in the future is not gonna be this thing, this particular.
About the same design though, just a more updated version, because we are hoping to do like, baked goods and juice and stuff, and that's not adequate enough to do out of. That I built quite quickly, just to see if it would work. The next one would be,
Just for kicks. This type of expanded operation could fit in the capabilities of buildings.
oh no, because then I'd have to rent, right? Yeah, I mean,
He owns land.
yeah, I've got my own land. But,
Just ask.
we've been using a parking lot where the previous owner and the owner now, absolutely love to see their parking lot full, because what owner of a parking lot wouldn't want to see it completely full of cars? That's the point of having it. And so for 2 months out of the year at least, I can guarantee packing that parking lot full. That's why, losing parking spaces so close to the farm stand, especially when the majority of our customers are 75 and up, is
The buses.
and tour buses coming in as well.
In case, unless you guys want to chime in, I was gonna ask if you could come back with an answer to this additional question. If not, give us electronically at the next meeting. You want to take a look at the questions raised around retaining walls and potential issues from current design, so we can at least have an answer of what the impact would be. That would argue for a conversation to continue if you're willing to come back.
But just a quick thought, I'm just curious on how the Conservation Commission was able to pass variance for this pumping station without observing the retaining wall. So say if this was.
It's been a long time, so I can answer that.
Well, actually, it was August 15th of this year.
Lots of things come before us between then and now.
And so I was,
The only things I can remember is Parker River giving that permission for that, and then pumping of the water into the, that made you jump through a couple of hoops to approve the water off of.
Social discharge.
oh, with that too, actually, if I could make a suggestion on that, we do a little bit more public knowledge on it, maybe a little, some posting about it, because there's a lot of concern of why there's a pipe going out into the water. Of course, it was posted about, but it seems a lot of people are very confused, thinking that that's sewer water getting pumped out when it's just groundwater. So maybe, and not my thing, but maybe just a little bit more information out to the public on why that's there would be huge.
You know, that was- it's-
Can I ask a quick question? I don't know if we're ready for it, but the elephant in the room is Monday night.
Well, like I said,
What's
this is
going
not
on Monday
necessarily,
night?
I would for you to get involved in Monday night. The forces, I guess, are in motion at this point to get to town meeting. As much as we can bring out in terms of information, that's in our charge, and that's what we should do. We may be called upon in the meeting, handled by the selectmen. At that meeting, but we kind of have to respond with that regard. I'm not sure if we're ready to short change or short circuit that process. That will happen regardless of what happened here tonight and what might happen a month from now and what may happen in the
What's
future.
being asked of?
Are you familiar with the question on the?
No, I haven't seen.
Sparrow, if I can make a quick suggestion, there's a town administrator here tonight. And one of the most respected selectmen here tonight. And what he needs is the help of the Conservation Commission. Come down and take a look where he proposed that the parking area be. And just some help from town engineering and the curve cut. And if that happened, I think you've got somebody knowing the town's gonna help them for next Monday night, if you felt confident.
Well, I think that the best case scenario, both economically and environmentally, would be to move the pumping station. That's why.
I know, but we've talked about, there is another solution as well.
And sure, but I think that we've passed that time. You know, we only have a week.
And again,
It goes to vote in 1 week.
We've got
we are
town
not-
people here who can make things happen.
We cannot negotiate.
We understand that.
What you guys do with, you know, the officials in the room.
We're waiting to find out.
But anyways, it's to move the pumping station away from the farm.
And at some point in this process, it could not include us, until tonight, came to a point where the proponents were, my way of describing Mr. Wilson, to go to town hall and go to a special town meeting and ask this question, see if the town will vote on the following petition. Quote, to move the pump station number 2 to a different location, away from agricultural wetlands and away from the existing farm, and, excuse me, farm stand, end quote. That's what we're voting on. It's a yea or nay. And whoever shows up at the meeting gets to vote yea or nay.
2/3 vote.
He had 800 Yarmouth citizens verified, sign that petition. Now, if a quarter of them show up to town meeting, it wins. Because it's just.
So we can, you and I, we can do this all night long.
It's just like the kid. That's all he's looking for.
There is merit to the discussion and the points that you're making that we want to look into. We don't know what's going to happen next week. It may help the process, it may not help the process. But saying that we had 900 people show up at town meeting with about $200 million authorization to build a project. Quarter of those guys come, the vote goes the other way. So we're not looking at holding the vote in the meeting as much as making sure everybody who happens to come to the meeting understands what the issue is. Correct. And can hear the arguments if the time is allotted for that to happen. Obviously, you're going to be there.
I hope I'm allowed to speak, but I'm a little worried about that.
So, and again, that's away from this, that's away from this review of this group, but probably just want to tell these guys what you're alluding to, because otherwise it just sounds pretty.
Right.
Do you live in town yard?
I do.
Okay, so you would be allowed to speak as somebody who.
They are not accepting me as a
The
resident.
building commissioner objected to his application. And said his address
question as to
wasn't
whether
legal.
you officially
Yeah, but my whole life I've lived in the town here.
The town clerk was told not to accept his application to register, even though he's registered with the state of Massachusetts as a voter. So the building commissioner's got to answer for something
Very
here.
interesting.
Yes, that's up there. Yeah.
But this is a good place to be able to share these things. Thank you.
Look, we're all members of the community. If we had a cup of coffee here, we could keep going. There's another question on the warrant as well about plastic. So there'll be other people participating here, so we understand. I think there is interest on our side to continue to flesh out these questions and get additional information. So if you guys don't mind conferring, and I'm sure we get answers to some of these questions. And if we can share them with us beforehand, we feel it's appropriate to share them with the public beforehand, we can do that too. But nothing's gonna happen between now and then.
No, it's not enough time.
So I want to give you time to go to Board of Health if you want to.
See if I can get there. No, my father's.
You're in front of them for issue not related to this?
No.
Okay.
Thank you again, Spiro. Appreciate all of you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Town citizens that listen. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Go back to our agenda, just to close out the evening. We did not pass any minutes. Did we pass minutes around, did we? No. Okay, we don't have to approve minutes for previous meeting. We're due to meet again in January. Who remembers for the first Monday? It's Very 6.
Yes, it's 6.
Close enough, I mean. January 6th.
Thanks again.
All right, Chris, thank you again. Making sure we don't have anything for Bass River, although his update was on the local access, we need an update from Bass River. I commended Jeff prior to the meeting on the 5-minute PSA that he did on this topic. I don't know if you guys have caught it. You guys are all watching Channel 8, right?
It's on the website also.
It's on the website also. I mean, it's a good quick primer on what we're here to talk about. This pumping station. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that these guys work diligently and professionally to get us to this point where we have a solution to a technical problem, which is we got the pump uphill. And that seems to be the most appropriate place to do it from. Does it come with risk and cost? Probably, but absent their recommendation that something is better, I'm not sure what the options are here. But if there are some accommodations, they may mitigate the risk that's there, and the impact that's there, then we should probably take a look at it and see if that's appropriate to put forward. To who we're in charge of the project, we can select. But other than that, we're here to do the intake. And I hope you agree we did at least an okay job of that this evening. But as the project goes on, we're probably going to see more of that.
The question I have for our technical staff is, I'd like to know what the negative impacts from a cost and time delay would be if we were required to move the pump station. There's a cost for design. There may be a cost for a change order to a contractor who's about to get a contract. And there's a cost for a potential cost for a delay of the project. Now, it would be nice if we knew and were selected what that impact is. Maybe you guys already know.
So can you add that to the list?
I can comment on that briefly, kind of at a high level, and I don't know if these guys can provide any better detail going forward, but I will say we're dealing with a couple of wastewater contractors now, and this is a different one from the two that we're working with currently, but as I'm sure all of you know, when you're dealing with wastewater, when you're dealing with contractors generally, if you make a change after they've been awarded a contract, that's going to be lucrative for them, and that's something that they generally would appreciate because they have the power with regard to the price. It's obviously a negotiation that happens, but it's not subject to competitive bidding. And so because of that, there's a significant cost to making changes at this stage in the project. But this is for any project, not just a wastewater project, it would be for a building project. You don't want to be making significant design changes after the contract's award. It's very expensive.
So is it fair to say that there's a possibility that we would have to make a change like that absent this conversation? Because we still haven't gotten permission agreement from the landowner to do this pump station.
There's all the options are on the table.
I'm just saying the answer to your question isn't necessarily because of this issue. It may have come up on its own if we don't have an agreement with the property owner in this
Well, you
case.
can rebid the project too. That's another option, but.
That's another option as well. It does mean that we wouldn't be in this current fiscal, on this current IUP plan, we'd be on the next or one after that. Currently, we have 0% financing. This was in Mike's update, and a 6.6% debt forgiveness. All that's at risk if you leave your place in line, if you will, to get back in place, in a future intended use plan.
So
that's significant dollars. That's significant.
I just want to try to clear the air a little bit. I may be the only guy that remembers when the Barefoot Trader was built. Built the property that we're talking about, the gift shop, it was built in the 1950s. I remember when this retaining wall was built, just to kind of a little local flavor. I understand the emotion involved here with this young man in front of the cranberry farm. Great, doing the best he can with what he's got. But we have a kind of a combination situation here involving public relations, trying to keep the project alive, on track. But from a legal point of view, this fellow is operating his basically motorhome. He uses the word farm stand. It's a motorhome. I watched it go there. It's only been there about 5 years. The motorhome got painted cranberry red. That was creative. And they cut a hole in the side of it. They're selling cranberries out the window. I said, hey, that was pretty ingenious. But his motorhome business is parked on land that I'm not sure who owns. And his parking to do business is on another parcel that he clearly doesn't own, that he's leasing. So the way his business is operating right now, he can function because he's got this adjacent parking lot that he doesn't own. That's the parcel that the town of Yarmouth is proposing to build a pumping station. So the question that I see here is, Jeff is alluding to, what's in the best interest of the town? If the town is going to take a $5 million hit to move this pumping station, I don't know what the right number is. I'm just giving you a hypothetical. And, I'm a big fan of business, small business. But if we're talking about an individual who, if his business were to disappear tomorrow, loses 20,000 to 50,000 a year in revenue for a couple of years, okay, theoretically, maybe it's a $250,000 hit to him. What could be done to mitigate? Well, maybe this idea of letting him set up shop on his own land, which is always one's good idea for a person in business, control all of the elements of the business. And that's quasi-attractive. If it runs into serious environmental problems, because it's adjacent to wetland, that's a problem. But whose problem is it? Whose problem is it? You know, and what I see happening here, you know, from step back analysis is we have somebody who is obviously idealistic, well-intentioned, but to some degree, trying to make his problems our problems. My understanding of the Water Resources Advisory Committee is to help the greater enterprise. Town of Yarmouth has been struggling to build a wastewater system for decades. We're underway. The journey has begun. This is really the first, I will call it snag, but the first controversy that I've seen in these meetings, and I've been sitting in this since 2018. It's not, in the grand scheme of things, a big problem. It's just not. If somebody came in and said, oh my God, you know, we found nuclear waste, now we're gonna, that's a big problem. This is, as problems go, a relatively small problem. Now, I grant there's a noise factor attached to it. And I think, you know, we need to look at the big picture. You know, the project is the greater good, trying to get something built and have it operational, potentially coming up on 25. Maybe in 27, we're going to actually have an operating sewer system. My goodness, what a phenomenal achievement for this little town to have done. So I think it's good to hear people out. But I think the final analysis, I've got to kind of not lose, if you will, the big picture. So I know folks are doing the best they can to, you know, get this easement under agreement. With that done, you know, the rest of the things fall into place relatively quickly. So just my thoughts on where we're at.
For that summation, if I had taped that, we could play it again on Saturday or next Monday. If you wouldn't mind coming yourself, you are allowed by the clerk to speak at the meeting.
Whatever you like, I'll do it.
One thing I think that's been lost in all this too is the fact that he's questioning, you know, what the failure of that pumping station could do to his cranberry bog. He's never once brought up the amount of nitrogen that that cranberry bog is discharging into that watershed from his bog.
Just cleaning up your flush.
I'll say no more.
Yeah, again, we could be bringing in a lot of different points.
He could pass on Monday and still get quashed by various permitting.
But can we close the meeting and you can have as much discussion as you want, but there are issues around that meeting, around that question, around the vote of that question. What actual effect does it have, even if it passes? We cut a deal, it's not going to be a cavalier. If there is an agreement with the property owner, then we have the easement, then the project kind of moves forward at that point. You're kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop, which isn't coming from our side at that point. I'm not sure these the folks who are in the business of saving the bog understand what that would mean to just keep going. So I think we're doing our job correctly. They're doing their job correctly. Selectmen are doing their job correctly. When the process works, the outcome is usually valid. So I'm comfortable with that. You know,
You could table the motion on Monday.
I mean, all of it is contingent on what we were alluding to. If 125 people show up, it passes. Well, if 126 people show up, it doesn't happen. So what's the point? We're all just trying to show up for the meeting. I mean, it's like having two candidates on November 5th and nobody If you don't show up to vote, you get what you get. So let's just do our job to answer the questions that people ask us.
I think if people would give them their facts versus what they heard when they signed the petition.
I guarantee there,
I'll
I
say
should
that.
say this, I don't know if this is a certified petition. I mean, you need a certain number of people for a town meeting, but it's not, that's not 800. No, so when you say 800 people sign this petition, they ain't from Yarmouth.
No.
I'll use the vernacular.
I mean, I was to say,
They're more likely from someplace else.
I've
Because the
been,
guys from Yarmouth, it's like,
I've been asked why we
Pretty
started putting
hard.
money in by eminent domain.
there's
No,
no,
at least by 3 or 4 people, 2 of whom don't even live in Yarmouth. So the information put out there.
these are tough meetings. We had 125 people at the last meeting, which is regularly scheduled fall meeting. This is a off-cycle, day, I mean, one question, kind of single shot, Monday evening, supposed to be 34 degrees. It's already dark at 4 o'clock, and this thing is at 6, right? Is it 6?
6.
So you tell everyone to come at 7.
Well, I still have one more question. I mean, I have gleaned that it's an enormous technical problem at this point to move the pump station in, location that it's not sort of right there. I understand that the idea of just sliding his operation just a little bit away from us has environmental permitting issues that, I mean, everything is subject to that. It has legal issues as to whether he's allowed to be on that property. He does not own the property. Right, so those are issues that are on the operator to, number one, get the legal authority, number two, get the environmental permitting. There's a third critical one is to get whatever other building approvals. My understanding is it's not lawful to use a registered vehicle for an occupancy purpose, and I think it was potentially misrepresented the handicap accessibility and other issues there. But if those regulatory issues, which did involve, the handicap accessibility, those are 3 big issues that would be on the proponent. The part that I don't understand is that does it cost like a lot of money to help? Maybe if, like he said, he wanted help with the. I'm just trying to specifically what they said. He said, you can help me with the curb cut, if you can help me with a flat area that has a few parking places, and then getting there from the site.
Still on their property, still on.
No, he's moving it now from capabilities to the property that is owned by his family
Right,
members,
still his
that he doesn't have permission to be on either.
There is no public property we're talking about here.
No public, and if you were able to do that, and I'm just saying, is if that eliminated, right, the opposition to this pump station, how much is that gonna cost us? Because it may very well be, if that opposition was removed, we might have an easier time getting all of the approvals that we need and getting this whole thing marched forward. So that's all I'm saying is that if we, I don't know enough to stand up at town meeting and say, oh yeah, we can do this, we can do that. But I'm just saying is if you evaluate the different steps that you could take to solve this problem, if that was one of them, what is it involved? Is it does it even have to be a part of this project? What's involved with it?
Well, that's what I was gonna say, I'm sorry, I was just saying, in that scenario, are you saying the pumping station doesn't change, it doesn't move, it stays where it is, you're moving his operation onto a separate parcel?
Just sliding it away from
Well,
us,
it's onto his property.
so we could operate without having him look at us every
His
2
actual
seconds.
access road to his buildings and back is on the west side of that property, at the end of 178 feet away. Because that's the other side of that access road is the site that we.
But does he have to go that far?
I don't know how, well, there's a
Can we just
culvert in
get him out of
there.
our hair? What I'm saying is, can we just move him far enough away from us so that we can operate our facility?
There's a culvert in back of where his facilities, I don't know how many feet beyond it is, that goes under Route 28, so that's what creates all the wetlands in there. And that's where he discharges the bogs, the water from the bogs out that culvert.
So I'm just saying, is I don't wanna buy, it's, you know, some big technical problem, but I'm saying he's got, if it's a pop-up temporary farm stand, how hard is that to scoop down? It seems to me that
He's talking about making a permanent structure, if you listen closely, rebuilding it and adding different product lines, I'm gonna be open more often, so you're creating a permanent structure in essence. In and of itself, it might be a nice economic development component to what's happening down there, so I'm not gonna disparage it. I'm just saying, win or lose Monday night, that's plan B. It can be, still go ahead and do that even if they lose. As long as what we've been talking about last is, can't afford to move this plan. That's cost prohibitive at this point. We lose financing, we get held up by the contractor. It takes time to redesign. We're in a different building cycle now around March, we're in the fall. Yeah, you want to calculate that? 2 billion? 30? Prohibitive?
It's in the.
And you want to spend $100,000 to move over it? Anyone would take that deal after Monday. Let's see what happens Monday. All we're doing Monday is deciding who wins this hand of poker, who's gonna have more chips at the end of the day. So let's see who has more chips next Monday.
I think if the town is able to stand up Monday night and say, we're gonna monitor the retaining wall during construction. If there's any impact to the retaining wall, the town will rebuild the retaining wall.
That's half their argument.
Which we
It's
would-
more than half their argument.
Which we would do anyways.
Well, yeah, if you're building something, you're not getting down, you're rebuild it.
Yeah, I mean, that's gonna happen anyway.
And they've
To
been
be able to
told.
tell the public that.
They've been told.
So,
Put it in the lease agreement because it's actually with the capabilities person, not with him.
right. Okay, so,
Say that wording is gonna be in the lease agreement,
so
the easement agreement.
his cohort here was a little bit of a surprise, but Bill is bombastic to say the least at town meeting, and he can speak. It's all right. So those of us who've been around as long as John, we understand. Bill's been around, we've been around. He's on the Board of Health for how many years here, right? So he's not a responsible person, he's just able to get up at town meeting and speak.
Make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
I'm just saying, whether Chris speaks or not at the meeting, Bill will. These arguments will be put in front of the people who come to the meeting, as they should be. And if we can't do a decent enough job explaining the ramifications of the vote, then, you know, shame on us. If we're not capable of getting a certain number of people to this event, this meeting, you know, shame on us. It's important. I don't know if they can convey it to their constituency better than the town can convey it to the rest of the town, but you know, kudos to those who can. I assume we're having the same kind of issues with the plastics question. How many people showing up for that and what? I mean, it's less controversial, but it sounds like everybody's in agreement, you can't implement it quickly enough. I mean, you can't implement it this quickly, so, okay. Can't imagine giving people showing up and saying, no, I want it now. So when they go to get a cup of coffee on January 1st, there's no coffee? That's just not reasonable, right? So, motion to adjourn, second?
Second.
Mark? Dave? Lee? John? George? Will?
Aye.
All right. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everyone.